So one of the broker owners that I coach had me talk to his entire company about something that is super, super important. I'm going to share the insights with you guys in today's episode that I think a lot of real estate agents either don't consider upfront, but certainly they come back to regret. And it is my hope that through this episode, you don't have to go through a lot of the pain that I went through in my business. Certainly in the group of agents that I was talking to, they were all experienced agents. These were all agents that were in the business for 10 years or more. And the reason why this broker had me talk to his experienced agents was because, like those agents, I see the same thing in that there are still agents that have been in the business for over a decade finding themselves having to do things to get clients the same way they did when they were a brand new real estate agent. In other words, they're still having to chase business down because they haven't done some of the things that we're going to talk about in today's video that potentially will lead to a different result if you follow this path. So I'm going to share my screen. This is what I shared with this group of agents. And this is essentially a framework that I shared with this group. Essentially, that takes an agent from being brand new to the business to over 10 years in the business. And essentially, the way that it works is in your first couple of years, most of your client acquisition will come out of your outbound efforts. So this is outbound prospecting, this is door knocking, this is doing open houses, this is going to networking events, whatever the case may be. This has someone's success in real estate in their first couple of years will come down to purely their effort. And very little of their business, I'm probably being generous here, but maybe 25% of their business will come through referrals or word of mouth. And I show you this on screen because for most agents, they don't even do the outbound piece. They just take what comes their way. Because a lot of agents, when they get in the business in the beginning, they have a lot of their sphere of influence respond to them being in the business because maybe they have a big network. And so they'll have a big first or second year. But after that, all that dries up, they find themselves kind of stuck. Well, then what happens is if they do the right things, which we're going to talk about in today's video, the years 4 through 6 can look a little different. That maybe half of their business comes through their direct effort, their direct sweat equity per se. Because what ends up happening now, if they do some of the things, again, that we'll talk about, they start to get more word of mouth business. They start to get more inbound business coming to them, having people contact them. And then in their 7th year, years 7, 8, and 9, if they do the right things, they can do less outbound, get more inbound, and their word of mouth grows. And then after being in the business for about 10 years, they can have the vast majority of their business, hopefully a lot of it, because I think agents would argue, well, most of my business right now comes through word of mouth. Yeah, I know. We're not talking about doing 3 or 4 deals a year that you get from friends and family. We're talking about a big, big business, one where you're making hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars in income through repeat referral and word of mouth business if you do the right things that we will discuss in today's video. And I laid this out and I went through a lot of details on the strategies and the tactics to make all of that happen, which I will share some of those insights with you today. But really, mainly, the main idea is this. So I'll pull something up on screen to show you what I mean. This is what I showed this group of agents. And when I did, a lot of them, I think, hadn't ever thought about their business this way. And I break this down with the real estate agents all the time in that there is 3 business verticals. There is client acquisition. So this is prospecting, marketing, advertising, generating new opportunities, right? Client acquisition, getting new business. Then there is the second business vertical is client fulfillment. What happens when you convert one of those leads, when you take a listing, when you get a buyer to sign a buyer agency contract, fulfilling on those duties that got you the client in the first place. And then lastly, the last business vertical is what we call client retention. What happens after the transaction is closed? And what I walk these agents through was something I think most of them would agree with, and I think you probably also will be in support of this. That yes, there are some agents that do this better than others, but for the vast majority of the industry, our attention, our focus mainly, which is fine, is on client acquisition. This is what everybody talks about. It's what everybody wants to talk about. This is what all the questions I get are about, which is lead generation. How do I get leads? How do I get leads? How do I get leads? How do I convert those leads? Some people focus on client fulfillment or the client experience. What is that experience? Because most of the time when I ask an agent, okay, walk me through your client experience. When you take a new listing, what is the process that happens? They kind of look at me sideways. And they're just like, well, I just kind of, they don't have a process is the point, because they spend less focus there. And then for the vast majority of people, when we talk about client retention, what is the strategy or system you have in place after you've sold someone a house? That's where I think things really start to fall apart. And so when we think about these things and we say, okay, if an agent were to focus on the second two buckets or second two verticals as much as they are with client acquisition, would they wake up in 5 or 10 years from now and have a client acquisition problem like most do? And the answer clearly is no. And so let me give you some things to consider. This is what I have always said for years. Most of you on this YouTube channel know me as like the outbound prospecting guy, the sales guy, which is fine. That's important. But nothing is as important as the number one client acquisition strategy that we don't talk about often enough, and that's my fault, and I will start talking about this more and more, which is the client experience. The whole idea around if you only had one client and the future success of your business was depending on that client experience and that person based on their experience turning you on to more people and those people on to more people and those people on to more people, would you be in trouble or would your business thrive? And when we talk about the client experience, I'm not talking about just getting them through and doing an okay job. I am talking about a raving fan red carpet experience. One that when your clients deal with you, that they cannot stop ranting and raving about the experience you put them through, so much so that they scream it from the mountaintops everywhere they go, that every single time you take on a new client, that person becomes your best lead generation, your best client advocate, that proves to be way more powerful than any new lead generation tactic you could ever put in place. Because we know that two things are true. Right now, without you even focusing on it, if I had to guess, most of your business already comes via this channel. Just imagine what it could look like if you actually focused on it. And we also know that the best business and the way people do business is by word of mouth, especially in real estate. Who's your guy? Who's your girl? Who should I talk to? That is how most real estate transactions come to fruition today. Most. Yet we spend not nearly as much time talking about the client experience as we do generating opportunities from strangers, people we're not even in relationship with. And so that's number one from today's episode is to refocus on mapping out a client experience from start to finish, from the second that client says, "Yep, we'd like to move forward. We'd like to hire you to sell our house." From that moment to the time you're sitting at a closing table, do you have a process that is mapped out step by step by step, where that seller is getting video updates from you along the way that outlines, hey, here's where we're at in the process. Here's what you can expect in the next step. Here are some common things that may occur in the next step. Some things for you to look out for. Because we know when we survey the consumer, most consumers don't have a great experience with their real estate agent. And most of them say that the biggest complaint in our industry is that the real estate agent that I hired to sell my house did not, in fact, fulfill on all the promises he or she made during the listing presentation. We see this all the time, making big promises, over-promising, and under-delivering all the time. That's the norm. Is these transactions are super rocky, they're super chaotic, they're filled with stress, they're filled with anxiety, they're filled with both parties, you being the real estate agent and your client, with a feeling of they can't wait until this nightmare is over. That's the unfortunate truth. So let's flip that around. Then the other thing is, when we look at client retention, which is where I think people spend the least amount of time working on their business. Like, what happens after you close on the sale? And there's all kinds of studies and research to back this up. I'm not just making this up, that a lot of people can't even remember their real estate agent's name. And so we know that this is a massive, massive problem, that your database is under attack from companies out there that are doing a better job marketing, advertising, and communicating to your past clients than you are. When we know that the best source of business, if you focus on it, are the people who have already done business with you. But yet here we are again, worried about going out to people we don't know when we spend very little time on the people that have already trusted us to do business with them. So that's the second piece of today's episode, is to rewire your focus on, okay, what happens after I've served my client, after I've given them a world-class experience. It doesn't start. What I often tell people is that's when the relationship begins, not when it's over. I think a lot of real estate agents do the exact opposite, that after that closing, they're like, oh, gosh, thank God I got through that thing. We look at it completely differently, that this is the beginning of something. And they go into our Raving Fans Club. And this is where they're taking part in different events. This is when they take part in our birthday program. This is when they take part in our consistent communication, when they're getting added to our private Facebook communities. When we make them part of our community that we continue to serve. And it's because of that focus with that group of people that group of people then becomes, again, our biggest advocates. And they go out into the marketplace and they become our promoters. This is the best sales team of all time. Your past client raving fans will do more for your business than anybody would ever do for your business when you think about in terms of hiring a sales team. Because these people are ranting and raving to you anytime real estate comes up. You want to think about, how do I have a communication plan that is so strong that anytime one of these people even hears real estate, not only do we come to mind, but they feel compelled to bring us up because of because of the impact we have had in their life. Not just because we help them buy or sell a house, but because we care. And in often cases, we show up in their life more so than their family, more so than people they would call friends. And there's all kinds of stories around things like this all the time. But being thoughtful, showing up in someone's life in a way, and we're not talking about, sending the holiday card that's branded to your brokerage. That stuff is not, that stuff just doesn't work. That stuff doesn't compel someone's emotion to support your business. Yeah, it's important. But what about writing a hand? I'll just give you one example so we don't have to get into the weeds of it. But what about writing everybody in your database, all of your past clients, all of your raving fans, a handwritten letter during Thanksgiving explaining to them what they mean to you in life? Because I don't know about you, but when is the last time you got a handwritten card from anyone, let alone on Thanksgiving, outlining all of the things they are grateful for that you bring to their life? Imagine how that would make you feel. Imagine how you would be aware of the impact you have on another person's life and you being that person for them. And so now you start to think about, man, what are all the things I could do to show up in these people's lives in a way that others aren't? So that when you wake up in 10 years from now, you can have a massive business that is all inbound, that is all coming to you as a result of you serving others, so that you don't have to wake up 14 years from now in the business chasing down expired listings, knocking on doors, buying Zillow leads. You don't have to do any of that because you've built a database, sort of like a financial planner does, sort of like a CPA does, sort of like how a dentist does, where they build their practice, where these people come and see them forever. That's what we're talking about here. That's what we're talking about. We're talking about building a sales practice, one that grows over time, that compounds year over year over year over year because of how you take care of people, the same way a dentist takes care of her patients, the same way a chiropractor takes care of his patients. That is what we are talking about. The same way a financial planner manages her book of business with annual reviews and constantly looking at the returns that she's getting for her clients, and client being the key word, because the difference between customers and clients is that clients implies a long-term relationship, whereas customers is a one-time transaction. And the unfortunate truth is that although most real estate agents say we are in the relationship business, treat people like customers, not clients.